Hey everyone, and welcome back to InfoFluency's monthly webinar. We are glad that you are here and watching, and we discuss all things data here. So last month, we did a brief demo of our new revenue management tool. We looked at some features, we talked about some use cases, and if you were not there or have no idea what I'm talking about, we built a pre-built analytics tool with 20 plus views to be able to help companies quickly hook up their data and be able to have insight about their customer base, revenue, profit, etc. So I will link the one from last month below here if you want to go check that one out. But this month, we have a guest in the house. Jordan Walker of Bondfire Strategy is joining us today, and she is going to help us understand the importance of leveraging first-party data, what is first-party data, and then even as the years go on, why is it going to be so important for us to continue to understand these topics and be able to really use the data that our businesses have? So I want to give her the floor and let her introduce herself and tell us the origin story of Bonfire.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Alyssa. I've been really looking forward to this conversation today. So glad to be here. First, before I get into what Bonfire strategy is, I kind of want to kick it back to where my experience is and what led to starting Bonfire because it's completely relevant to today's conversation. Prior to launching Bonfire in 2021, I was really involved in specializing in digital marketing tactics as it relates to business lead generation. And I worked with companies that were in industries like advanced manufacturing, construction, aviation, and even some technology companies. And there were a few things that I noticed. One was a common thread, which I would assume is pretty similar to anybody that is joining today. And that's companies are really looking for effective solutions, not just for your budget, but also for your time and capacity, effective solutions to drive sales and revenue growth. It's kind of a given, right? Well, there were also a few things that through my experience over the last decade that I recognized were hindering that experience or that drive to create the effective solutions. The first thing is that effective solutions require knowing who your most valuable customer is. Not just who can buy our products and services, but those who bring the most value to our organization. The second thing is, in order to create an effective solution, you have to understand that customer's decision making journey. And in order to do that well, that means that you have to break down silos that exist within your company, which we tend to see where sales and marketing maybe aren't working very closely together. But it's also the other cross functional groups that engage with clients as well. So it could be customer service teams, it could be, your finance team. These activities for customer acquisition are not just one team's responsibility. And because of the data rich world that we do live in, it really means that we can foster a more collaborative environment. So, speed up to 2021. That's exactly why I launched Bonfire Strategy. We exist to help companies activate their customer data in order to first improve and strengthen customer relationships, improve overall customer experience, but also working with teams to break down those silos in order to create, develop, measure, and optimize customer acquisition strategies that are really more in tune with their customer profile. And that's totally why I think that this strategic partnership that we have with InfoFluency makes sense because it's all about how can we activate insights for company growth and for bettering customer relationships as a whole.
Absolutely, and we don't know the data part, but we need partners like you that can help companies activate that data. So we love it.
Well, before we get too much further in the importance of data, I love this slide because this shows what the data landscape has looked like over the last several years, right? Like this has been my entire career here. I'm going to focus on these first couple of blocks though, and then Alyssa, I'm going to have you kind of talk about the zero and the first party data blocks. First things first, as companies, when we think about sales and advertising tactics, we tend to lean on these last couple of blocks here: second party and third party data. Second party data is something that we're probably all familiar with, whether we know it or not. By raise of hands, who utilizes Google ads, Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads? Who utilizes maybe industry newsletters that they're sending messages out to that industry's followers, right? That is second party data. That is data that that organization technically owns because they have the relationship with that customer base. Third party data is slightly different. Third party data is data that is owned by other companies, but then sold to organizations that do not have direct relationships with those customers. This is data that is potentially mined from your credit card history, any of your purchase habits. It's mined from your device activity, which we know as like cookie tracking. And it can help you find all of these different interest-based type of targets, such as who might be in market to do something.
Mm.
So second and third party data has been what I would consider a luxury when it comes down to customer acquisition strategies. Because if we're an electric vehicle company, let's say, and we're trying to find people who are in market to purchase a new vehicle, show intentions to care more about energy efficient products, are within a certain radius of electric charging stations, we can totally do that through third party data. We can get as hyper targeted as possible to get in front of those people. Before getting too far though, third party data is not necessary, like, while yes, it's hyper targeted and currently it is inexpensive, it's not necessarily the best because you still have to have mass reach in order to get a little return. Average clicks on ads that utilize third party data are still less than 1%. So you still need that wide net in order to capture people, which is why these first two blocks actually are better than second and third party data. But I'll let you get into that.
Yeah, it's a good education for me too, because I know we utilize second and third party a small amount with our clients, but first party data is really where we play. Our whole history of InfoFluency has been helping companies understand and see and make sense of their business data. And so first party, even more than zero party, is where we have done the majority of our work, helping clean up the messes underneath the hood, helping them be able to just have actionable insight. So first party data, for sake of a definition, is just the data that your company collects. So most of the time you will see this stored in a CRM, ERP, MRP, maybe some secondary platforms. Other data resides in accounting, maybe inventory. And I mean, let's be honest, the spreadsheet that everyone hides, or multiple spreadsheets, it's also in addition to those business applications. So most of the time, this can tell you a lot of information. This tells you the demographics of your customer. It tells you their purchase history, their frequency of purchase. It can tell you, the size of the company. All of that good stuff is kept, in those applications, and that is, your first party data. But like you said, Jordan, I mean, there's been so much reliance upon second and third that there's been almost a lack of realization of the gold that lies within of the first party data. And so, yeah, that's really where we've done the majority of our work. Granted, we have brought in industry data, third party data to really enhance, bolster, give more meaning, industry benchmarks, things like that I think can really add value. But what's so crucial is the first party, because it's who are your customers, who is the client's customers, who's actually buying your product and what's true about them, and how do we leverage that. So from my perspective, even, from where we're headed in the landscape with second and third party kind of maybe leaving us, I still think that apart from that, first party is where it's at, where the intel on your customers is and where the activation and the strategy, really lies.
100%.
To touch on zero party, we we haven't really used this because, in all honesty, most companies don't capture this.
Yeah.
And I think as we were talking about, even before this, it's in the minds of the salespeople. So your
Yeah.
salespeople are on the front lines. They're talking to customers, prospects, leads, and they're understanding, some of this feedback. They're understanding the intention, and maybe what they're marking down is, hey, he intends to buy in 6 months, and I'm going to follow up. But it's not really tracked in the sense of, okay, why is he, intending to buy in 6 months? Is there some sort of cycle involved in his business? It's
Yeah.
just for me to sell, I need to follow up with him in 6 months. So I think that there's a ton of opportunity here to be
Yeah.
leveraged. And I think it can still be inside the CRM, but it's hard for companies that are already trying to track, the main metrics on their customers to include some of these, what I call them, maybe a little more abstract data points,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
a preference is almost like hard to measure somewhat.
Yeah.
So I think that, this is a super under leveraged and underutilized party, if you will.
Yeah.
But I think, moving forward could have huge implications if, started to be tracked well.
Well, and to your point, I mean, the sales team has a lot of work that they already have to do in their day. And so then, like, taking what might be in their brain or in a notebook and then transferring it into CRM, that is one added step. But
Mhm.
that zero party data is actually where marketing excels, whether they actually realize it or not. So, like, when you see like chatbot functions or like social media polls, or, maybe the company has like they're a local entity. So they're really putting a lot of strategy around like gaining local reviews and things like that. That's usually seen as a marketing tactic purely for like visibility and for like that word of mouth.
Mm.
But again, like if those silos are broken down internally and we see how like that zero party data bolsters and improves first party data, then now you're seeing how like these different teams can act, they're already performing these functions. It's just a matter of, are you connecting it in a way where it's being funneled into the same place?
And to your point, like, what if, the chatbots, there's one question that's being asked the most, is that something that you need to put into your sales, process to
Yes.
that's confusing. There's such small things like that, but to your point, the silos, the salespeople typically don't have access maybe to that
Yep.
information.
Yeah. Yeah.
So tell us where we're headed.
Yeah, so it's good that we just highlighted a few like really valuable ways that we can utilize zero and first party data. And to your point, I do agree that that third party data is helpful just to get an idea of like the market landscape, competitive landscape, industry benchmarks, things of that nature. Second party is going to be safe for a while. However, it's the third party data that we are not going to have access to here pretty soon. The
Mm.
reality of the situation is that data privacy regulations aren't actually new in the marketplace, but they are going to start heating up a lot more over the next year. We first saw data regulation really hit on a big note when the European Union implemented GDPR. Then here in the States, California Consumer Privacy Act took hold. And now we're starting to see that ripple effect happen across the globe. So one thing that we've heard recently, Gartner reported that by the end of 2024, nearly 74% of the global population is going to be under some sort of data privacy regulation.
Crazy.
So, regardless of whether your company is really only focused on maybe like a regional level, maybe you only deal like domestically, in the United States, a lot of the tools that we use for business have to still comply with what's going on in the global environment. And Google is one of the biggest players in this. So, you've probably heard about like Apple disabling cookies or allowing people to do that. There are other browsers like Bing and Firefox that have really started to implement privacy regulation, but Google has now started to begin to phase out third-party data collection, and it is the largest single data private or third-party data collector that exists. Google has more than half of the browser traffic across the globe. And so if you think about all of the little cookies that we're all like building on our devices, when Chrome is going to discontinue doing that, that means that a lot of those, like, if I really wanted that, electric vehicle buyer that is like ready to go right now, those kind of intentions are not going to be available anymore
Mhm.
after 2024. And those that are available are not going to be as inexpensive as we see it now, because supply is going to really drain down, demand is going to go up, because the truth is a lot of companies are not prepared for this because the fear hasn't happened yet.
Mhm.
So we kind of want to like layer that fear a little bit in today's conversation, but also just to recognize that, like you kind of hit on the previous slide, companies are already sitting on a lot of gold when it comes to their customer data. So all is not lost. It's just really a time to like organize how you're going to respond to this within the next year.
Absolutely, and, now that we've have maybe freaked everyone out a little bit, there's still this is the next year, like, there is still definitely, like, a conversation and an organization to be had around how can we utilize the data that we already have, and I
Yeah.
think that's the key word is that you already have it, like, there's not it's just a matter of tapping into it, and so I think that's maybe if this is the discouragement that we bring, there's an encouragement to man, open the hood and see what's underneath. And, it's no, and not necessarily to promote our own businesses, but this is the time to see,
Yeah.
what data you've captured, make plans to start capturing more of it. And, utilizing a tool like what InfoFluency has built, because that's a quick way, just start seeing insights now.
Yeah.
And
For
so
sure.
no need to panic. But I am curious, Jordan, with your experience with companies that you've worked with, you know, companies that are data rich and maybe their data is all over the place. If
Mhm.
that's, the current situation a company's in, what challenges, have you seen that they may be facing?
Yeah, and this slide outlines it perfectly on that front. When we have data in a lot of different areas, it not only fragments your possibilities to think through that full customer journey, but first and foremost, it really gives you a lack of visibility into who your true customer base is. I think inherently companies, even for ourselves as like smaller businesses and whatnot, you tend to know who your customers are. But what we're like really missing out on is that visibility on who are the customer cohorts that bring more value to the table. Who are the ones that, are in tune with particular products or services that can help you weather different storms as they come through. So not having your data in one easy to read space kind of hinders your ability to not only see like your true valuable customers, but also segmentation. That also leads into limited forecasting capabilities. If you are forecasting on a holistic level, that's fine. That is from like a revenue perspective. You do need that. But again, if you're experiencing peaks and valleys, where are those peaks and valleys coming from? And you might be able to sense that purely just from a customer purchase level. But how do all of the other activities that you're engaging in sales, in marketing, in customer service that are helping out or maybe hindering that success as well? I kind of hit on this in my introduction, but one of the biggest challenges that I've worked in when I was in house corporate, as well as, within an agency where we served a lot of like Fortune 500 companies, is siloed teams lead to siloed decision making. A lot of the time, sales might only come in at the beginning or at the end of a conversation. Here's what I know. Here's what we need more of. Here's what isn't working. Here are more ideas that I have. But then you have marketing and other departments in the middle just trying to pick up balls and see, where to toss them next. All of these teams really need to be operating from the same visual, right? They need to have the same goals, the same KPIs. Maybe their individual tactics are broken out to, for goal setting and whatnot. But ultimately, everybody needs to have access to the same data so that you collaborate better and defragmentize your customer acquisition strategy. Because we're living in a world where the buyer has a lot of decisions, regardless of what industry you're in, the buyer can perform as much research as they want before they ever talk to a human being. What that means is that you have to consider that experience online and offline, regardless of platform. And if only certain platforms are being engaged by certain departments, then your acquisition strategy is going to feel broken to the user, or it's also going to feel like maybe you don't understand them quite as well. So they're going to keep doing their research and find somebody that really speaks to them at a point of relevancy.
Absolutely. And that reminded me of a client story, is that we had a customer who sold B2B products online. So all of their traffic and business came through a website. And they had a marketing team, and they had basically a customer service slash sales team that facilitated maybe their larger customers who ordered on an ongoing basis. So they had customers, all over. They were in the real estate space. And so,
Mhm.
but all of their data was locked up in the on-prem servers, just monitoring the website traffic. So
Yeah.
anytime the sales or marketing people separately needed to know anything, they would just run a query. Anyway, all that to say is that they decided they wanted some more visibility into their customer base, and we did a basic like customer analysis, and one of the things was a customer ranking list. And by far, I think by a very good portion, their highest customer, revenue producing customer, none of them knew who they were. And so they were like, we've never heard this name. Like, who is this? They just maybe order under the radar. So the new CEO brought everyone into the room, like marketing, sales, everyone, and said, listen, like, we need, some customer retention, account management strategy. And
Mhm.
so he himself flew out to meet this company, the CEO. And I mean, we're not really talking ROI, but I mean, they ended up like 3Xing that account just by knowing who they were and having visibility and working together,
Yeah.
as teams. And that was the CEO's, mandate was, hey, we're all getting in a room together.
Yeah.
We're going to have a, a unified vision. And so
Yeah.
that reminded me of that.
That's a
Um,
great example.
and it's just things like that you're like, wow, just visibility into your data activates that strategy is just something so simple, but so profound.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, as you were thinking, or as you were talking, an analogy came to my mind so you're gonna have to ride with me on this one.
Okay.
So if the customer or the client data is like an orange, most
Mhm.
clients are probably, squeezing some juice out. So maybe they're, analyzing native metrics within their CRM, maybe something along those lines. So maybe, they're getting a little juice out. But to really what we're talking about here, bring all of these into one place, squeeze it for all it's worth. Like, you need one of those tools, like the
Yes.
juicer, to
Yeah.
juice it, and to really be able to enjoy the the orange juice at the end of it, and to know that you got everything out of it. And I just don't think, at least with a lot of the companies we worked with, they're having, like you said, it's a fragment, it's a part, it's a piece, but it's not the whole story, it's not the whole picture.
Yeah.
And when that is all brought together, it's a game changer for the vision and strategy of the company, and just some of those minor strategies that can be implemented. And it's
Yeah.
just such a game changer. So
Yeah.
squeeze the juice out of the orange.
Well, what I love about, like, as you were just describing that, what I love about it is it's also kind of highlighting like the easy thing to do with, you only have so many hours in the day. You already have like a set of tasks and to-dos that you have to check off. The easiest thing is to pick up that orange and just squeeze, because then that little bit of juice is that immediate gratification.
Mhm.
And and that's fine. Like, a little bit of that can go a long way, right? Like, that is a lot of what like companies have built their revenue off of, is just getting a little bit of like squeezes of juice over time. But like that presser, like visual, like, man, you're saving time, you're saving a lot of energy, you're creating a lot of efficiency to get this beautiful glass of orange juice that can hold so much. I don't know, are we taking this analogy too far?
I
But
don't
to me,
know.
it totally makes sense.
And I
So
mean,
I might be thirsty now.
and not to make try to land the plane, like, that's a one-time push, like, you're
Yes.
doing a one-time squeeze as it's tiring over time and not efficient, like you said, just to squeeze here and there.
Yeah.
And if you just do that one push, and that's kind of, even something we've heard, entering into that project, entering into sorting through our data or seeing how clean it is or putting it all together, can seem maybe just like a big undertaking, but
Mhm.
really it's just like that one. Maybe
Yeah.
there's ongoing strategy, there's ongoing conversation, of course, as businesses change over time, but really it's the squeeze is let's combine it, let's
Yeah.
bring it all together and do that
Yeah.
one time, effort. And I think, it's there's always some sort of aha moment. There's always some sort of like, man, I wish we would have done this earlier. And so to your point, I think the efficiency and the just the effort is really
Yeah.
valuable, and especially as we're heading into this, the years
Yeah.
upcoming.
What I hear a lot, and I think this makes a lot of sense, like as we're talking about the not only the power of like your customer data, but combining it is a lot of times when I'm working with companies, one of the key things that I always hear is that we just need somebody to help us take a step back and really look at things at a big picture. And I think like it's easy for anyone, regardless of role that you have within a company, regardless of how big or small your company is, you do get into that mode of like, okay, today is this day, here are what my goals look, this is what my goals look like over the next few weeks, these are the tactics, these are the things I have to check in on. And you get to a point where like if you don't have that intentional moment to take a step back, you could be missing out on a lot of really good information that
Mhm.
can help you refine your strategy. Maybe you're spending energy in places that actually are not helpful to your customer's journey, and you could be saving yourself and your team a lot of time by just having that moment. Like, and it doesn't even have to be a long time, like, once a year, a couple times a year, just have that take a step back, moment, and being able to see everything in one place and not have to like gather up the troops to say, build me all of these reports
Mm.
based on questions that I think I should be asking, but I'm not quite sure if those are all of the questions I should be asking. I think, is just another way to kind of like change that mindset of rather than going and looking for the story, reverse it and see what story you're able to find when you take that step back.
Yeah, and to that point, and to your business model, sometimes people also need like a third party objective person to come in and kind of start prodding and asking questions and helping them to take a step back. Because I
Yeah.
mean, we all know it's when you're working in your business or in the company every day in, day out, it's sometimes hard to take a step back and like see the full picture and ask some of those basic questions that may form the story, but you might need someone who's not in that, every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
All right, I want to play a game. So the
Okay.
game I've named the game "What I See, What Could They Do?"
Ooh,
So,
okay.
so I have three views from our analytics tool, and I'm
Okay.
going to give some context on each one, and I'm going to say, "Here's a few things I see," and then pass it to you. What could they do with that?
Cool. I'm ready.
So, um, the first is a trend analysis. So what we're looking at here is the bottom half of the dashboard is revenue data. So we're kind of modeled that out in different ways. And then the top you'll see is filters. This isn't a live interactive model, but you would be
Mhm,
clicking on the filters by the
mhm,
different attributes of the customer. So
mhm,
a few things that jump off the page to me with this is some obvious seasonality. There
mhm,
is, and I will mention the darker colors or mark more revenue. So
okay,
I see some really clear seasonality in February, April, September, slightly November, and that is
mhm,
also still it shows to be true year over year in the evolution. Second thing I see is some really inconsistent revenue when I look at the trend line. And then also some inconsistency in the revenue in the forecasting on the gray part.
Mhm.
And third thing that jumps off the page to me here is financial services being the top industry and looking like they sell way more of product type A and B than C and D.
Yeah.
So those are some initial observations. What could they do?
Yeah, so hitting on seasonality first, because I think you hit on a couple of things that really stood out to me on here as well. When we're looking at seasonality, what I like about the trend analysis, as you pointed out, is that ability to then filter down by either industry, company type, product type, so on and so forth. And that's the first place that I would start is, are these higher revenue months really coming from very specific customer profiles? So is it driven by financial services, since that's what we see as our largest industry? Is it driven by, industrial? What does that company makeup look like? And then the next question from there, and this is where I would bring, the teams together, is then say, okay, well, if we're noticing that these higher peaks are being driven by particular customer profiles, okay, business development teams, what are we noticing? Like, why are these key months? Are these key months just because we're operating on the standard Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 sales cycle? Is it because the products that they're looking for are in relation to very specific things within their industry? Is it our doing, or is it something that's really been being driven by them? That's one thing that I would want to know immediately. Kind of building off of that then is looking at that in reverse and like, holy cow, July, what's going on there?
Yeah.
And so, like, again, is that our own doing? Or if we're drilling some of these things down, are we noticing that maybe product C and D, where we're not seeing as much revenue coming from, those categories, or as, much activity from those categories, like, is there something there again? Like, is that maybe something that we could be upselling to our most valuable customers? Is that something that we need to get ahead of them sooner rather than later? What is the typical buy cycle for any of these products that are standing out? Like, is it that we're starting the conversation 3 months in advance, but in reality, the customer really is starting to think about it 6 months in advance?
Mhm.
And so I think, like, seeing some of these things or some of these like trends, and then that ability to drill down and really see what's correlating, can really help identify, where do we need to be putting our energy? What does that plan need to look like? And then drilling then into the different, cross-functional teams of what questions are being asked, what information is needed, how do we need to refine messaging, so on and so forth.
Do they just need a recurring revenue model so they don't have such intense dips?
Yeah, for sure.
You know? All right, I love it. Second one is a customer lifetime value and churn rate view. So what we're looking at here is on the far left, the green triangles represent net new customers year over year. So a total at the top, moving down through the years. And then the bar charts represent the lifetime value, and then the circles represent the churn. And then you have some other views on the side on the far right. So
Hmm.
two things that really stand out to me, or I guess more just questions, is I noticed that the net new decreases every year.
Yeah.
So 2016 down to 2018, you have 51 net new customers. So that's
Yeah.
something that I really noticed. Another thing that really stands out to me is in the customer churn rate evolution, there's a 100% churn rate by year 4. So
Yeah.
two jumps, what's your take?
Well, the first, like, yes on both of those, but my initial question is, especially if we're looking at year one and the churn that occurs almost immediately, are we qualifying people? Like, are we actually bringing in the right leads? And so then drilling down into that to figure out, like, okay, who are these different customers who actually made it to year 4 and or really survived that second year?
Yeah.
Like, who are those that made it and who didn't? And then start, kind of peeling back the layers of the onion there. And then going into year 2, what made people stay? So it's like there might be a mass exodus in year 1, But if they can survive year 2, then we don't really see that peak again until year 3. And so what is special about year 2 is that when, if and I don't know what the product is that we're looking at here, but an assumption that I would make is this a where you have to get like the initial onboarding and sale in year 1, but then the bulk of the work really occurs over year 2. So then year 3 might be a maintenance relationship where maybe there isn't that next step on where do we take them from here. Maybe there's not another product or service that can build off of that, initial round. And so I think of that in the way of not necessarily like customer acquisition strategies outside of like qualifying leads in the beginning, but what does our product lifetime look like in relation to our customer lifetime? And are there ways that we can be improving that process as we go along? So this might be more of an operational, situation that we need to address.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
the cool thing too is if this was live and interactive, if you like hovered, you could see which of the customers churned at which year. So it would
cool.
be easy to drill and see, kind of answer some of those questions. But
Yeah.
and I obviously there's way more we could get into if we knew a lot of the context here. And then the third one is product type details. So this gets into what we were looking at, the attributes on the top, what product type. So this breaks down, looks like this company has 4 product types, A through D, and looks like pretty significantly product type B is like their best
Hmm.
seller. But another thing that really jumps off is it's not just revenue, it's the number of customers. If you look at the
Yeah.
performance grid, that it's a number of customers and the amount of revenue it's bringing in. But also I noticed too that on the trend line, it's the
Hmm.
most volatile of the products too,
Yep.
like as far as up and down. That's what I see. What's your take?
Yeah. I mean, that was the thing that I was looking at was that volatility in relation to product B. And so then my question becomes, and if we're kind of looking at like some of the data details below, product B is in relation to a lot of professional services. And so, again, kind of looking at that customer cohort, what are they using this product for? Why are they using it? What need did we fulfill with it? And again, like, is there a part in our sales process where maybe that's like the entry point for them? But then again, like, what's kind of that next step? If they get the initial, like, information that they're looking for or the product that they need, is there a cycle of their buying that we need to dig into a little bit more? Because then when I look at product A,
Mhm.
only a couple of clients there, but higher value and a much more stable, trend line, at least until you get to that like, end of the year time frame.
Yep.
And so then my question is, what makes that so stable? Why are those like what attributes of those companies made them applicable for that product? And are those attributes in any way similar
Mhm.
to maybe those that are engaged in product B? So maybe they started with product B, but then they could move into something that is similar to product A, even if it's not fully similar, of that nature. So I look at it from a how can we adjust like our product makeup for
Mhm.
these clients? But then also, if we have more clients in product B, but more volatility, we need to be looking at ways that we can still provide knowledge, expertise, and customer service, to them along the way, because maybe they're a really good referral source for
Mhm.
us. And
Mhm.
maybe that is the audience that we need to be tapping into in order to build our qualified referrals because they've used the product and, seemingly enjoy it.
Yeah, I love it. So after that, if you don't want to hire Jordan, I don't know what could convince you. But that was fun, and that's all we have time for. As Jordan mentioned earlier, we have formed a working partnership between InfoFluency and Bondfire Strategy, and in short, help you see the data to help you activate the data. So you see it with us at InfoFluency, and then Jordan, helps with the strategy to activate your data. And so if any of this, struck a pain point with you, if there's a hard part in this process for you, we would love to have a conversation. Feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we would love to sit down with you. And we will be live again next month with a new guest, July 12th. We're just so thankful that you guys are here supporting InfoFluency, and we're thankful to help you leverage your data for the years to come. So please reach out, and thank you, Jordan, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.